Hi, I'm Jermaine Wells. I'm your host for Safe Inc of Schenectady's When the Sender is a Pretender, the first virtual forum to educate you about the existence of sex trafficking and the vulnerability of youth in our community. As more youth have been confined inside due to COVID-19, sexual predators have been increasingly lurking and recruiting youth online through such social media channels as TikTok, Snapchat, Instagram, Kik, Twitter, YouTube, Facebook, video games, and others. The hidden online activities can present a real danger to our youth. To raise awareness about this danger, 3 dynamic speakers will share timely and important information on how to protect our vulnerable, at-home, and homeless youth from online predators. You will hear from Salka Valerio, a survivor of sex trafficking, who will share her personal story and how homelessness impacted her journey. Then, Melanie Puorto Conte, coordinator of Safe Harbour, will provide an overview of sex trafficking of our youth in our community. And finally, Kyla Guru, founder of Bits N Bytes and an intern with the Center for Internet Security, will provide cybersecurity information to help protect our youth online. Since its founding over 30 years ago, Safe Inc of Schenectady has served over 8,000 youth and young adults by providing shelter, counseling, and supportive services to homeless youth who are sometimes sexually abused or trafficked. Safe Inc operates the only certified emergency youth shelter in Schenectady County and is the only co-ed shelter in the county that can house a youth under 18 and his or her child. Safe Inc also serves as an overflow organization for youth from nearby counties that lack or have limited services for runaway, homeless, or exploited youth. And now we're going to hear from Salka Valerio, a survivor of sex trafficking.
Hi, my name is Salka Valerio, and I'm from Binghamton, and I am a sex trafficking survivor. So to open up my story, when it happened, I was 14 years old. I lived in Norfolk, Virginia at the time, and I can give you pretty much a brief history of how it happened and where I came from. So originally I was born in Brooklyn, New York. Both of my parents are from Honduras. By the time I was a year old, I was sent to live in Honduras up until I was 5 years old. I came back to the state at 5. My primary language is Spanish. So coming back to the States was really awkward because I didn't know the language, and it was pretty much, I was in a busy city coming from Honduras. It was kind of something to adjust to. At the time, I didn't see my mom's face for about 5 years. So being with her was a little bit strange because the person that I knew as my mother was my aunt. So me and her wasn't really close at all. I was homesick, so I was pretty much like a quiet, timid child at the time. Going to school was a challenge. Because from the outside I look African American, so they dumped me in an English speaking class, and I had a hard time because I didn't really know the language, so I would get notes coming home, and that pretty much led to my mom being physically abusive with me. She was physically abusive with me pretty much my whole childhood. By the time I was 9 years old, she met my stepfather and she moved us to Norfolk, Virginia. Norfolk was another adjustment that I had to make because it wasn't really too diverse. It wasn't a huge Spanish-speaking community. Going to school was also a challenge because they didn't have ESL classes. So learning how to write in English, and English is pretty much a hard language, so I had a hard time with that. So I had to stay back in the 4th grade just to get everything in order. During that time, it was really hard for me because I wasn't really in the safe space where my aunts and my cousin and my family members were. So it was just me and my mother and my siblings. So she was very physically abusive, and I pretty much became a child that suffered with depression because of that. I did try to commit suicide a few times. The last time that I attempted, it almost worked. I overdosed on some medication, and at that point, I had to go into the emergency room and get my stomach pumped. But luckily, after that last attempt, I survived, and it was something that I decided I would never do again because it wasn't a great experience. So instead, I started running away. And at this point, I was running away to friends' houses, my best friend's house, people that I know, of course. So my mom would always find me. And when she would find me, she would drag me by my hair, take me back into the house, and continue to abuse me. CPS was called a few times. My fourth grade teacher, I remembered her discovering my bruises on my arm. And it was like the most terrifying moment ever because I'm like, oh, wow, now she knows, and now she's going to call CPS, and now they're going to come to the house and investigate, and now my mom's going to be upset, and she's going to hit me when they leave. So I try to beg and plead with her not to call no one, that I was okay, and they did. And they came in, sat down, spoke with me, my mom, and of course my mom just had a mean glare towards me and said in Spanish, you're going to get in trouble right after he leaves, so I don't even know why they waste their time to call CPS. I am capable of killing you, and you just acting like I sent you to Honduras. And I really believed her, and I was really in fear. Pretty much I kind of slipped through the cracks of that system. So I just felt like, well, they're not going to help me get away. So that's when I started doing self-harm. So the next thing was pretty much trying to attempt suicide. With my last attempt, I did get some type of help. So as I got older, instead of now committing self-harm, started running off and running away. Freshman year of high school, I was 14 years old. I met this guy, and he was transitioning out of high school, so he had already graduated the year before I got there, but he would still come around for games. I would tell him pretty much things that were going on at home, how I didn't want to be there, how I hated being home, and how my safe place and my escape were always going to school or being able to go to my friend's house. So he came up with this idea of me running away with him. As a 14-year-old, I wasn't really thinking like, oh, this is a red flag. I was more thinking like, yes, this is an escape. So I trusted him. I believed him. I didn't think of any red flags. I didn't really know what red flags were. So it was pretty much easy for him to convince me that this was a good idea. Did figure like, oh, maybe I should speak to the people that I'm going to be living with. So I did talk to the so-called aunt and uncle on the phone. They sounded like good people. They assured me that they would help me get into school, that they would make sure that I'm taken care of, that I didn't have to bring anything, and that I was going to be in a safe place. A couple weeks later, they sent the bus ticket for me and him to get on the Greyhound bus. We got to the Greyhound bus station, and he was like, well, I can't come with you. I have some things that I have to take care of here for a little bit, and then I'll be there. So I was like, okay, that's fine. It wasn't a big deal, but I'm at the point of no return. I can't just go back. I done skipped school. I was late for the bus already, so I might as well keep it moving. So I got on the bus and came to New York City. The aunt and uncle met me at the gate where the bus let me off. Went with them. I wasn't alarmed yet. I didn't feel like I was in harm's way. No red flags came. When I started feeling alarmed and when the red flags started going up is when these other women was calling the uncle daddy. And that was kind of strange because I'm like, well, these women don't look like they're not your kids, and they look like they're the same age as you. And I know some people may use that as a word of endearment. And I think, I thought that was your wife, so how come everybody else is calling you that? So I asked one of the girls that were there, is like, how come you guys call him that? Like, that's not his name. And she's like, oh, that's our pimp. And I don't even know what that means. So I was like, okay, what's a pimp? And she tried to explain it, but I'm still like clueless because, I come from a sheltered environment. I don't even know what the word pimp is. Some of the girls started explaining, well, we're going to be going to the track later to make some money. So I was like, oh, okay, so you guys gamble on horses or something? Like, You're going to a racetrack? Are we running track? Like, I don't get it. So they explained that it was pretty much you go sell yourself for sex. Once they said that, I kind of froze, and I immediately said, yeah, this is not what I want to do. Can I go home? And they were like, no, you're already here. Unfortunately, the pimp that did get me actually paid this young man. So I pretty much was a package that came from Virginia, and now I'm one of his girls. I would have to make the money back that he paid for me to be able to get back home, which was pretty much a lie, I guess, because I never went home. I was crying, I was screaming, I was ready to fight. Next thing you know, I woke up in the basement of a house. And there I was kept for, I'm not sure, but it felt like a long period of time. At the time that this happened, I wasn't sexually active, so I was a virgin. They had something called like pretty much breaking me in would be me having sexual encounters with people throughout the whole time that I was down in this basement. It was a pretty horrible experience. I don't know how long I was there, but it just came to a point that I had to just agree with it because no one knows where I'm at, and I could just easily end up dead somewhere in a dumpster or wherever. At this point, I decided that I wanted to live, so I will just agree with the things that they told me that I should be doing. So that's what I decided to do to stay alive. But I still had a plan. My plan was pretty much to find a car and tell that person in the car to take me somewhere, which I did. A car stopped. I got into the car. I didn't ask any of those questions that they told me to ask. And I just automatically told that person, I'm 14 years old. I don't belong here. This is something that I did not want to do. And could they please take me to the bus station or help me get home? And unfortunately, the person that picked me up was another trafficker. So the next thing that happened was he drove me to my trafficker, who was around. And he said, I could charge you for her. You could pay this amount of money to get her back, or she could choose to stay with me. And the safest thing I felt like was just choosing to stay with that trafficker, because going back to that one would probably, who knows, I probably wouldn't be here today to speak about it. So I decided to stay with the one that picked me up. He had his girls out in the street. We would work from 12 midnight to 5 o'clock in the morning outside on the track with barely any clothes. It'll be wintertime. You couldn't wear no jacket or anything. You would just be outside. He said, the colder you are, the quicker you'll jump into a car. So pretty much he made sure that we barely had anything on. When we got to the house, we would have to strip naked to make sure that we weren't hiding any money or anything like that. And we were kept in an apartment with 3 other girls, and he would come and give us food. And then the next time we would actually be outside would be when it was time to work. And I don't know the period of how long I was with him, but then I started talking to some of the girls that were out doing the same thing that I was doing. And the things we would talk about would be like pretty much how to keep yourself safe from aggressive people that were buying sex, how to keep yourself safe from other pimps, or sometimes if you're outside and another pimp could kind of kidnap you while you're out there. I got kidnapped probably 3 times. The last time that I had like a little cell phone that they can keep in contact with me with. I had called one of my friends in Virginia. Apparently, I don't know how, but this phone recorded my conversation, and they heard the conversation and they beat me up really bad. And for my punishment, I didn't eat for several days or drink anything. And because of that, I ended up really sick and had to go into the emergency room. And this is like another place where I fell through the crack because of not much awareness of what trafficking looks like. I went into the emergency room. Of course, my trafficker came with me. I didn't know where I was at, so when they asked me for my address, I had no clue. So he interrupted and told them. They asked me how old I was, and I lied and said I was 21. And then they took me to the back to do my exam. He was talking for me. He said I was his niece from out of town that he was taking care of me. I don't have no insurance right now, and that he was the person responsible for me, and could we just hurry up and get what I need to get out of there. The whole time I was pretty quiet. My head was down. I wasn't really engaging with the nurse. She asked me if it was all right if he left the room. Of course, I said I want him in there because I wasn't going to say no, and because I'm leaving with him, and then the next thing you know, that could probably get me in trouble. So I was like, no, he can stay. We went through the exam. They gave me an IV for dehydration, and then I was on my way. In my mind, going through this whole thing, I would say, like, who can I turn to for help? Because it just seemed like everybody was just down with it. Like, everybody knew that girls were selling sex, that there were pimps involved, and no one wasn't seeing anything wrong with it. So in my mind, I felt like this is just a situation that I got myself into, and I have to figure it out for myself. I don't know how to even tell anybody about it because I felt disgusted, and who would believe that this is happening? And they would probably ask me, why didn't you just leave? And it's just more complicated than that. You can't just leave. Every time I turned around, I felt like I was bumping into a trafficker. So ultimately, how I ended up getting out, I was dancing somewhere in Queens, and it was this guy that used to come there. I would just have an attitude. I would be mean. Sometimes, depending if I drank enough liquor, that I was happy enough to be nice to people. But most of the time I would like stick to myself. I would have attitudes. I would have to be prompted to go dance or to go do something. And this guy came up to me and said, how come you're always looking so mean? Or you're a stripper. You should be happy. Didn't you choose to do this? And when he asked me that, that was my opportunity to say, no, I did not choose to do this. I actually don't want to be here, and I want to go home. So we made a plan for me to like get away from that place. So the next day, the next time he came in, he had clothes for me to change into, and then we kind of snuck out the back. And the pimp caught us leaving, and he tried to chase us down, but luckily he didn't catch up to us. So I got away with him. He was pretty young himself. At this time, I was probably like 15. He was about 19 years old, 20. He still lived with his mom. So yeah, so it was just a challenge being with him because he couldn't really bring me to his house because his mother would be like, well, who is this? She's not allowed here, typical parent stuff. So when she would go to work, I would sneak in the house to take showers and eat and stuff. And if she was home, I would have to be outside. I would be like in the parks. And I kind of lived like that for a little bit, just in and out his house, then kind of sleeping on the streets. He had like a girlfriend at the time, and she would be curious of why I was always around. And then I overheard him tell her that he was pretty much planning to put me in the street. So here I am thinking he's a friend. But he doesn't know the game at all. So I kind of had to like play my cards to kind of get away from him as well. So how I ended up doing that was going into the house while his mom was there. So she said that I couldn't stay there, of course, but she had a place for me to go. And she took me to the Covenant House. And when I got there, I felt safe. They had a bed for me to sleep in, which I didn't sleep in like a warm bed in a long time. I was able to shower and felt comfortable, not knowing that the next day I would be going to court and end up in juvenile detention. Once I got in there, pretty much I figured out why I was there. I didn't have any guardianship in New York State, and they were pretty much trying to figure out where to place me since I was a minor. So if I was going to go into a foster care system or if I was going to go into a group home, something like that. So once they figured out who I really was, I was missing from Virginia, but I was considered a runaway. So my mom did call the cops and said I ran away. So being that I was considered a runaway and I didn't have any guardianship in New York State, the best place to put me was in juvenile lockup. They gave me a pregnancy test and I was pregnant. I don't know in what course of time I got pregnant, when I even got pregnant. I don't want to have this kid. I don't even know who the father is. And me being so young, I don't know anything about abortions or any of my options of what to do. So being in the juvenile detention center was great. I know that sounds weird, but it was a happy place to be for me because I was safe. After 6 months, like, my belly was bigger at this point. And now it was time for them to take me back to Virginia. And then one day I remembered that the Covenant House existed. I went back to the Covenant House and I wasn't really sure what to expect because I remember the last time I was there, they locked me up. So I didn't really know what to expect this time. At this point, since I was 18, I was able to go to the older youth side. So I stayed there. The Covenant House was pretty much, at the time, I felt like it was horrible because in the morning, we would get up, make your bed, go eat breakfast, and then you're out for the day until 5 o'clock to come back in for dinner. So you're just roaming the street until you're able to come back to the shelter. So because I signed up for Job Corps, they were able to give me an extension of 60 days so I can get my paperwork together and my things together to be able to go into Job Corps. I was there for about 2.5 years. It was a great experience for me. There I found pretty much like my voice, my leadership skills. My major that I took in Job Corps was culinary arts and was security. So I came out of there pretty ready for the world. Security was because I wanted to go into criminal justice eventually. I studied criminal justice police. I got my 2-year degree in that. I ended up getting a place. And when I got the place, I've been there for 12 years now. Seeing from then to now, I would never imagine like owning a car, having a cell phone, having a TV, like just little basic things like that was just really hard for me to see, or really to see that it was achievable. But once I was able to graduate from school, I was like, wow, I could really take on the world now. Like I completed something. In my healing process, a lot of things that helped me was going to church, and T.D. Jakes was very phenomenal and relevant to a lot of the things that I kind of processed in my mind, that, you know, some of these things were my fault. And sometimes bad things happen to people and they align for it to be good. Since that day, I pretty much dedicated myself to say that I won't allow this to happen to anyone else that's around me, or if I could, I'll prevent it to happening from younger kids. I just made up my mind that I would start sharing my story. Whether people would judge the story, I didn't really care. But I felt like it's time to share it and say it so that way people won't think that this is something that's not an issue, and that they would start seeing faces, and that it wouldn't be an invisible or underground issue, that everybody would be aware of it and look out for it, because there were plenty of times in my story that people could have intervened or helped me get out the situation. And I said to myself, if I don't share my story, nobody would ever know. You know, nobody won't be aware. Nobody won't be looking for these things. Like, I'm proof that it happens. And I'm also proof that even though it happens, you could survive and you can actually live a life and be a great mom and be a good friend and, you know, actually make a career for yourself. And I never even thought about a moment that I would be sitting here telling anyone this story and actually doing work with raising awareness and changing policies and things to make sure that survivors weren't victimized and that they actually have help. And places like the Covenant House and Streetworks were vital to me because I didn't have any family to run to. The places that I had access to were shelters, and, you know, luckily that they were in place for me to go to get help, to get fed, and to get encouraged. It would have been easy for me to turn to drugs. It would have been very easy for me to go say, hey, I know a different way to make money and this is how I'm going to survive. It would have been easy to do that if I didn't have access to that type of help. But because I did, I was able to find encouragement. I was able to find ways to create a life for myself. And here I am today, an advocate, an activist, and a mentor to youth. and a person that is making sure that human trafficking don't go underground, that everyone's aware of it, that it's in your face, that you find out what the red flags are so you can know how to help and where to go, and making sure that places like Safe Inc., the Covenant House, Streetworks, doors continue to stay open, because there are vital pieces of our community that can help kids and people that don't have anywhere to turn to. And that's the end of my story. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Salka, for your bravery in sharing your experience. Next up, we have Melanie Puorto Conte, Safe Harbour Coordinator. We'll get right into questions.
Okay.
The first question is, how would people find you that may need your services?
A number of different ways. Department of Social Services and probation work cooperatively with me, as well as youth serving agencies such as Safe Inc. Mm-hmm. And we do a number of screenings for each child that comes into service. First one is called the Rapid Indicator, which is kind of an observational tool by the person completing the assessment, which gives us a sense if the youth is at risk or maybe being trafficked. Like, are they missing school a lot? Are they away from care, away from home? Are they out for the night and they're only 13 years old?
Right.
Those kinds of things. So we do the rapid indicator. Then if there are indicators, we do something called a comprehensive assessment.
Okay, what's that?
That is something based on federal law regarding human trafficking, behaviors being done in exchange for goods or services, a pocketbook, getting their hair done, nails, or money. So if we see any of those or the youth are at risk for it, we complete that comprehensive assessment tool. Then the child is referred to me through DSS, probation, Safe Inc., and other youth serving agencies. So I open up a situation, begin home visits, working with what we call a critical team to work with the youth and the family caregivers to wrap them around with services to help get them out of the trafficking or exploitive situation.
Wow. What would you say to somebody that doesn't believe that it's that big of a deal, the amount of sex trafficking around here especially?
Right, because there are still some people who believe all the myths out there.
Right.
That it's the guy in the Walmart parking lot picking up kids in the white van, or it's only foreign nationals. First I'd start with education, and then I'd start to tell them that, like last year in 2020, we completed 3,500 screening of youth just in Schenectady County, of which 79 of those youth were high risk or were in fact being exploited in a trafficking situation in just our little Schenectady County.
Wow.
I currently have a caseload of about 20 youth, youngest being 11, oldest being 21. I could probably have a lot more. The others, outside of the 20, we try to provide preventive programs. We're starting a new program called Girls Empowerment Program to work with those kids that have been identified at risk or being trafficked or exploited in our community. Doing that in conjunction with Planned Parenthood, and we'll do that in person. We have other groups in the community, like Working Group on Girls, that also do work with girls. So we do a lot of things like that to help wrap around the services that we have. We're very lucky in Schenectady that we have so many good people working for the cause. It's a significant problem in Schenectady and in all the surrounding counties and in the nation, particularly with online exploitation, online recruitment, with so many kids being, taking part in remote learning, all having access to Chromebooks, unsupervised time on electronics, parents working 2 and 3 jobs trying to make it through the pandemic.
Exactly.
Kids just have access. Kids get lonely. Kids didn't feel connected. So any online predator comes along and tells you, oh, you're beautiful, and can read their vulnerabilities. It's easy to groom them, get them into the situation. Oh, baby, I love you. Will you send me some pictures? And you get a 12 or 13-year-old who's insecure about themselves, and they think somebody loves me and understands me, and thus begins the exploitive situation. There's a number of apps that these perpetrators are connecting with the girls.
Some of the popular, something like TikTok, maybe?
Snapchat. TikTok, Kick, Whisper, Skip the Games, OnlyFans, which is kind of a unique thing we've seen with some of our kids, is that it's supposed to be just a picture sharing app.
Right.
But these same perpetrators are getting girls and sometimes the transgender boys to share their pictures on this app. And they pay them via Cash App.
Yeah, yes indeed.
Instagram, Reddit, Omega Personals, Facebook, and many, many others. Another pitfall that we see is the online gaming systems.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, they kind of groom the youthful gamers,
right.
And they'll reward them with online currency, particularly like with Roblox, Fortnite, Minecraft, all those kinds of things, and they will lure them through those rewards, through that online currency. And one of the things we see is the Esteem and Discord app. So those are problematic because I know the FBI right now is investigating a couple cases locally where youth have been lured into trafficking situations via this mean. We also have the FBI and Homeland Security looking into a number of ones, just in our Schenectady County.
Just in this county?
Just in this county.
So, I mean, the numbers couldn't have gone up. I mean, we're all kind of inside, right? So during COVID, the numbers couldn't have gone up that much, right?
They've gone up extremely quickly, and
Really?
We're having a hard time keeping on top of the enormity of the problem.
So it's gotten worse.
It's gotten worse, yep. People looking for connections and predators looking for youthful targets. It's scary. I've been doing this a long time, and I don't think I've ever seen anything quite like this. And the apps keep changing, and
So, I mean, it sounds horrifying. What can a parent or a guardian do to protect their kids or their loved ones that they're looking after?
Know what your child is doing on the electronics. I help oftentimes, or there's other people who can help. Our Homeland Security Victims Specialist is very good at this. We talk to the youth and the family and say, this isn't a game. Sometimes the brutal truth, this man isn't there for you. He could be a guy from Eastern Europe who's just playing you, or it could be the predator from 4 streets over trying to lure you out, and he's really 57.
Right.
He's not a 15-year-old boy. So, to alert the parents, alert the youth about what you can do. If a parent, thinks that their child is being trafficked in this manner, they can contact me.
Right.
And I will work with law enforcement, getting better results working with federal law enforcement to actually do something about this, that they can search their electronics, their phones, fire sticks, something I just learned the other day, that kids can communicate with these predators, particularly sometimes if parents take their phone away or put controls on it. Parents didn't know, and I didn't know until recently, that you could do it via fire stick if you have a smart TV. And so many people have smart TVs these days. Yeah,
I mean, there's so many ways to get online. Basically, most of the devices in the homes are smart now. You talk about the TV and the gaming system.
And now the school districts are starting to put software on the Chromebooks where any untoward comment can be picked up, monitored by the social workers, the principals, those kinds of things. Anything from suicidal ideation to sexualized comments to threats and bullying. So that's a good thing. But the most important thing is for parents to have an open relationship talking to their kids, which is sometimes easier said than done, and to know what's going on. Look at their phone, look at their Facebook, when you can have access to it. I had one grandparent who was very clever and was able to clone the apps on her granddaughter's phone, which was a really good thing because she's one of the youth who was being exploited. But we're still, working with Homeland Security and other agencies to get the predators who are doing this to a 13, 14-year-old girl.
Yeah, I mean, so as far as the the gender of those that are being exploited, do you have any kind of numbers as far as, male youth to female youth that are being exploited? Because I'm pretty sure there's,
Yes.
both, but is there a
It's
discrepancy?
about 85% female, maybe 15% transgender
Okay.
youth,
Okay.
and the rest would be males that are being exploited. And our demographic holds pretty consistently with the rest of the U.S. and the state.
Okay. So with Safe Harbor and the services you offer, what are the demographics that you work with? I mean, it's youth, but what ages do you work with?
Right now, 10 to 21.
Okay.
When I was doing Safe Harbor back in 2015, 16, and 17, the demographic was older. It was
Okay.
16 to 21, but we're seeing it so much younger, particularly because of the
10 years old.
Yeah, it's scary. Particularly if they have an older sibling or a cousin and they say, oh, look at this, and they get into the web.
What do you think the responsibility should be for these app developers and for these social media programs? Do you think that they have some onus on this problem? Do you think they're doing enough? Do you think they should do more?
I think they have a lot of onus because of, certainly it's social responsibility, because there are really bad outcomes when these children are exploited, whether physical outcomes, but the emotional outcomes, working with the adult survivors. Under the best of circumstances, anybody who's in a trafficking or exploitive situation has complex trauma that takes years to get through. And the app developers understand the addictive nature of what they're doing, and they play into it for their own personal growth. They really need to step up because all the data shows, as I said, 90% increase on cybercrimes, on children, and this online predatory behavior. So I think they really need to step up or have some kind of countermeasures.
Okay.
Because
I would love. Can you explain more on the counter?
well, I used to work in suicide prevention, and one of the things that social media would do is, if anybody said any words that, or Googled anything about suicide, warnings, solutions, and everything would come up after they searched those words. I think we need to do that with human trafficking. I think also we need to have algorithms to weed out the predators searching for children online, more pop-ups about that. I think there needs to be a lot more cooperative efforts on education.
Okay.
That's one of my big things I'd like to develop in the next few months, is a program for youth, parents, community members about online safety, online predatory behavior. And more than bullying, about the human trafficking. I know it makes people uncomfortable to talk about it.
Absolutely.
But we need to get it out there because it could be your grandchild. It could be your next door neighbor. It could be your niece. And, as far as demographics, this kind of exploitive behavior doesn't know any lines of, where you live or your social status or your monetary status or anything like that. It impacts all the kids across all situations. I mean, the only way it might not impact them is if they don't have access to internet. And everybody seems to have access to internet one way or the other. Yeah.
So it seems that the internet has been a primary source for people to continue predatory behaviors on youth.
Yes.
And I just want to mention, and that's what I was getting at, it knows no, race, orientation, if they can find a victim, then they will try to exploit that victim.
Absolutely.
So I asked before about things people can do to prevent and help, but I want to give you an opportunity to go over some things that maybe we hadn't mentioned.
I think a lot of parents, caregivers, teachers don't know what these apps are, and to be on the lookout on their children's electronics. And a lot of parents trust their kids, so they don't check their electronics and see if it's there. Talk to them what's this? Even if you know full well what it is.
Right.
You know, oh, what are you doing? Yeah, you mind if I look through your pictures? You know, those kinds of things.
Yeah.
Which of course will meet resistance.
Oh, well, right.
Yeah. Yeah. What do you need a Cash App for? You know, who set that up for you? Because I thought you had to be 18. You know, those kinds of things.
Yeah.
Educating them, particularly when the grandparents are custodians and caregivers.
Oh yeah, their knowledge of the latest technologies usually there's a gap in that.
Yeah.
Yeah. This has been amazing. I've learned a lot more. So it seems like education and educating the public, educating caretakers, and understanding what's at stake.
Yes.
So meeting resistance to your teenager or your child for wanting to see what they're up to, the stakes are way higher than having, dealing with them at that point in time, is what it sounds like.
Right.
And educating on the types of social media platforms and ways that our youth can fall victim to it seems like is a mission that you're
Absolutely
trying to occur. Well, this has been a great talk. And again, I want to just make sure you have room and time for any final thoughts that you might give.
No, I'm just very grateful for this opportunity to talk about this important subject. We have so much work to be done and so little time, because a tragedy is only an instant away for any of these kids. With the one youth I was talking about that brought home $800. Now, we're trying so hard to quickly wrap around services to her, because really afraid I'm going to get that phone call or that text that she's been seriously harmed or injured, because these exploiters are charming.
Yeah.
And they just see the youth's vulnerabilities. Oh, I really care for you. I know your mother's not kind to you. And I know you'd like some nice things. So, if you just do a couple favors for me.
It just seems that it doesn't matter how savvy you think your child may be, that these predators are really good at what they do.
Oh, they are master manipulators.
And we can't be too careful is what it sounds like. And the takeaway from that, and education and educating ourselves, we can't do that enough.
Right.
And so I want to say thank you so much,
Oh,
Melanie,
my
for your
pleasure.
time, and really appreciate the work you do.
Thank you. It's my passion.
Thank you, Melanie, for giving us the local insight on trafficking in our community. And next up, we have a dynamic 18-year-old, Kyla Guru, founder of Bits N Bytes.
I'm Kyla, I'm 18 years old, and I'm the founder and CEO of Bits N Bytes Cybersecurity Education, which is a national nonprofit that's dedicated to educating and equipping all vulnerable populations. So that's K through 12 students all the way to seniors and elderly homes with the cybersecurity education and awareness skills that we need for the future of technology. So how we do this is through a variety of means, just through curriculum and pushing that out into schools, as well as community advocacy and speaking to events like this for people that are listening, and being community advocates for cybersecurity and making sure that our policymakers and legislators are caring about Generation Z when they're thinking about the future of technology. So I do a lot of work in cybersecurity and also in gender equity. So I'm the co-founder of GirlCon Chicago, which is an annual tech conference that runs online now virtually and brings together young women to talk about technology and the gender gap. So really excited to be here talking about cybersecurity and young people and how we can stay safe and be the future of this industry.
There is a huge problem with sex trafficking, and it seems a lot of that starts with computer, right? And being online, online predators. So this is a twofold, so I'll start with the first question. How can guardians, adults, caretakers help their youth avoid some of the pitfalls that come?
So I think first, starting out on both the parent and the student end, it all starts with just being conscious about what you're consuming online, the websites that you visit, the apps that you download and upload, and the files that you're uploading and downloading. So consider with each app that you upload and download, what are the permissions that you're setting on that app? is it a flashlight app that's requesting permission to your geographic location or your camera and your photo libraries? Consider the privacy of each website that you visit. Could there be a virus on the website, or could it install something malicious onto your computer or your phone? Or is the website, who is the developer of the app or the website, right? Do they have potentially malicious intent, or is it just for research and exploration purposes? So consider all of those factors when you're kind of traversing the internet. Data is gold, and information is what you pass and provide to companies that eventually ends up in a cyber attack, or that is the real value that cyber criminals gain from cyber attacks. So at the end of the day, it comes down to your personal information. So protect your personal information as if it's the most important thing you have.
Wow. Okay. So I'm taking away from, reading what you're signing up for, because most of us just kind of go, well, we want this app, so we're just going to sign up for it. Another question for the youth, for younger people, because let's say a lot of the things you were saying will go over a lot of adults' heads, right? But how can the youth themselves protect, what are some of the advice you can give to youth for protecting themselves online?
Certainly. Well, I think the first thing I would say to a young person who's listening is that you already have what's in you to be a safe and secure digital learner. As Generation Z, as this new generation, we've grown up around technology. So a lot of the skills we've kind of inherently gained. We just need to make behavioral changes so that we're embedding cybersecurity into our everyday life. The main things are care about, look at your personal privacy the same way that you look at your physical privacy and your physical safety. It's a little more difficult online, but it's the same skills that we use about questioning. And then once you ask those questions, I think you'll be on the way to being a more analytic thinker when you're online. Yeah.
So in your mind, when do we start teaching our youth about, savviness and how to act online?
Well, I think it's from the first time that they touch a device and turn it on. So that could be kindergarten, but for some students now, it could be even younger, could be a little older. I think that is the moment when you start building those digital habits that you're going to carry with you throughout your entire time of being a digital learner and going through school and your career. So early and often, and the conversation has to include young people from the very first moment that they touch a device.
So that's a nice point that you touched on, is involving, right, the young people, because a lot of times it's dictated to.
Yeah.
And sometimes older people are not using technology the same. So with that, I want to get into sort of a scary subject, especially for me as a parent, is trafficking. Unfortunately, it happens enough where we actually have shows and specials, catching people that are trying to meet up and exploit our youth. Are there certain signs that you think that people should look for, especially parents or caretakers or caregivers of youth? I mean, how does this even happen sometimes? It happens to all people, even certain people we think are savvy. So do you have any advice on that?
Starting from understanding the motives of an adversary or an attacker is important, because then you realize two things. First, you realize the value and importance of personally identifiable information. When you sign on to a website and the first thing that they ask you is your date of birth and your first name and last name, oftentimes we don't think about what that means for us when we give away that personal information. But this knowing and understanding the motive of an adversary gets you to understand this is what exactly I'm giving up for a free service. They're not free, right? You're trading your data for something. So that's one thing. And then the second part is that you start to understand that, yes, my physical safety is tied to my digital safety. Because at that point, you're understanding that the information that cyber criminals are trading online includes things like addresses, which inherently puts you at risk if you think about that your address is in the hands of somebody who doesn't have the authorization to view that. So it's taking that extra layer of defense, like they relate it in cybersecurity to an onion, because you're peeling like the layers that you have. You don't want to get to the core. You're just putting more and more layers that at one point the cyber criminal is just like going to look somewhere else for low-hanging fruit. They're like, this person just is doing so much that it's just not worth it, their time. So kind of understanding your digital being leads you to be like, it leads you to knowing the symptoms earlier, right, and being able to take proactive action after that.
Right. Yeah, no, these are great steps. I think that because, especially with social media, it's so easy. We have it on our devices. Yeah. We don't want to be bogged down in remembering all these passwords. But yes, you're right. We are so susceptible. And I believe that people get hacked all the time. You get an email from somebody. Yeah. Somebody's already your friend, if you will, right? And you get another request from them. Right. And so those are your fake accounts. So these are the things that you talk about for data mining and having like 2 or 3 step authentication is what you talked about. It's a pain in the butt, but it protects you because once you're exposed, right, it could be a horrible time.
And it becomes normal, right? It's a pain. It might be a pain in the butt, like the first time you do it, but take those steps and make it a routine. I really believe that it becomes normal, just like actually password managers, so that the kind of concept you're speaking of forgetting passwords and having too complex passwords, because you really do have to have long and complex passwords to fight against these adversaries. Right. There are definitely tools out there that help make this into something that is a routine and something that you can easily kind of just weave into your everyday surfing online. And yes, as you said, it protects you like 2 or 3-fold, right? Because as I said, you cannot expect to have physical safety without cybersecurity. So, and you cannot expect to have physical privacy without cybersecurity. Right. Yeah. Because as I said, the information that you're putting out into the internet is exactly who you are. It's your identity that you're giving. The information that you put out is your identity, down to your genome, as I said, right? So, so it is information that is tied to your physical being.
All these things that you are saying is just notes that it's within anybody's power to do, right?
Exactly.
So, but it's easier said than done, like most things, right? So I'm gonna tread back again to, to trafficking. Do you think that because sometimes people are in a low point and they're looking for somebody to treat them nice or talk to them nice, do you think that that's part of the reason that people are wooed into being trafficked or exploited?
I think when you look at social media platforms today, they're only a drop in the ocean of the amount of websites and platforms that we visit. Like our Facebook, our Instagrams of the world, they are only like a small subsection of the entire app ecosystem that we surround ourselves with. First and foremost, I think it's understanding that how deeply your identity ties with just cybercrime and your being online. And from there, I think realizing how your identity could put you at greater risk, and then feeling empowered to make a difference based on that in your personal cybersecurity, in your personal safety. As I said, it's hard to know who exactly are on those platforms, and the company themselves surely can't keep track when millions and millions of users are joining every day and sharing information. It really starts to become a responsibility of the user themselves as well to say, okay, I'm going to take the first step and be secure, be more cautious, be proactive when I'm on these platforms, to keep myself secure, because I know that as a young woman online, I'm exposed to greater risk. And I also know at that point, I think earlier you were mentioning the role of parents, right? So, and guardians in this situation, or just trusted parties. And I think that conversation is so critical, of having that conversation early and often about here are the avenues that you can go to if you ever have questions or need help online, or run into an issue where you think that you might not be able to trust someone you're speaking to, or have a friend request, as you said, from a bot account that looks like your friend and seems like your friend, but maybe doesn't quite sound like your friend when they request you or send you a message, right? Something seems a little suspicious. I think having those avenues for young people to go to, it becomes a thing where we need to design safer social media platforms, a safer internet for everyone. And also we need to create avenues where young people feel supported, where we feel like we have a place to go to if we ever need help, and resources to look for.
So at this point, I want to kind of wrap up a couple of questions. What advice would you give if there were like only 1 or 2 top things that somebody should do to protect themselves?
With protecting yourself, again, it really comes down to conscious consumerism. So put your dollars where your belief is in privacy, right? So if you believe that an app is not trustable or is not handling your privacy well, if they're asking for permissions that you're not comfortable with, delete the app and delete the data associated with it. It's not, it's just say no, right? So it really does just start with like being more aware and being a conscious consumer. As I said, understanding the value of your personal information, the mere fact that it can be sold, like resold. And I think that in and of itself is obviously, like when you think about somebody selling your address without your permission, you think about just how it's just a gross violation of your fundamental right to privacy. And I think once that hits you, I think you start to change, or at least be more conscious about where you're inputting that data, the controls you have on your accounts. You know, take your accounts to the most private setting you can, or to only friends being able to see your information. Because your information is really the gold. It really starts with just being more conscious about the websites you go on, the information that you push out into the world, and the people that you interact with online.
Yeah, so the privacy settings, going in, putting it on the greatest privacy setting that you could do. Like you said, only friends being able to see it, because your information is just invaluable. And you're showing all these different ways that people monetize off somebody's information. And what you're saying, the solutions are, you know, to help protect yourself is not really that hard to do.
Not at all.
So, but the loss is so much greater than just taking a couple minutes to put on the privacy settings.
Exactly. Right. Yeah. And the tools are all out there. Most of them are out there. Multi-factor authentication is something that most platforms and websites provide at this point. If they don't, that's probably another sign that the website is not doing exactly. Right? And password managers, there are several options out there. Antivirus is something that your computer should have in case you click on a website that carries a virus or a malicious software with it. Always have that question in the back of your mind as, is this suspicious? What can I do to vet it? Vet it before you click it, vet it and check it before you do anything.
These are great. And, you know, I want to thank you so much for all the information that you've given us. And can you let our viewers know how they could reach out to you, you know, personally, or your company or anything like that? Because I'm sure plenty of people, and even I, will be trying to reach out at least to see what they can do to work with you.
Yeah, certainly. I mean, I was going to say, I think the action item that is so important for everyone at this point is just to take the first step to learn more about your digital living, your life online, and your consumerism. Like, the first step to being a conscious consumer is knowing what you're consuming and doing a check of the cybersecurity of the sites that you've been consuming. So our website is the #1 place to go, bitsandbytes.us.com. And then I'm also on Twitter, so you can find me at Guru Detective, and feel free to reach out if you ever have any questions. As we said, it's all about building a community to support in cybersecurity. So if you ever have any questions or want some tips about choosing password managers or choosing antivirus or installing these safe protections, definitely reach out and we can get connected. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for coming in and you know, sharing your wisdom, and we appreciate your mission.
Of course. Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you so much, Kyla, for providing us practical ways that we can protect our youth. Thank you all for joining us today and helping Safe Inc of Schenectady raise awareness about the hidden dangers of online predators, and more importantly, what we all can do to combat this problem to protect our vulnerable youth. In addition to raising awareness of this problem, there are other ways you can support Safe Inc's efforts to protect our youth, those who live at home and those who are homeless. You can provide a financial donation. You can learn more about Safe Inc by visiting www.safeincofschenectady.org. You can also like and follow us on our Facebook and Instagram sites. Today's virtual forum would not have been possible without the support of several sponsors. We would like to thank the Meyer Law Firm, IronGlass Productions, Bits N Bytes, Safe Harbour, Wetzel, LaSalle, and many others. Again, thank you for joining us today.